Hi, thanks for tuning in for Coffee Talk Thursday. I'm glad that you're here and really grateful that you tune in every Thursday to pick up some of my tips and tricks around mental health wellness. If I were to ask you, what do you think is the number one reason for conflict in relationships? And I mean any relationship, parenting relationship, intimate relationship, friendships, maybe relationships at work. What would your number one answer be? I would hope that it's going to be assumptions. So let me break this down for you. Assumptions are number one reason why we get into conflict. And the reason why assumptions are why we get into conflict in relationships, because the basis of an assumption is that we know something about the other person that potentially we have no evidence for. So we jump to conclusions and gather assumptions based on history of the relationship, what do we know about this other person, intimacy level in the relationship, whether we're close or really far away. But most of all, the assumptions that we make are about ourselves. So we meet people, we're in relationships with people, and we create a story of that person. We gather some evidence, we gather these little things about them, and we create this whole story that's mostly based on assumption. And we don't regularly check our assumptions. It's not a comfortable thing to be checking our assumptions, to say to someone, hey, Susie Q, I'm assuming this about you. Is that true or not true? We don't ever do that. So we jump to conclusions, we gather our assumptions, and then we walk into these relationships with these assumptions in place. And then we take those into all of our communication with other people without ever checking them. And then we gather evidence to support our assumptions. And here's the thing, what you look for, you will find. So if I'm assuming someone is really mean and cruel, I'm going to find evidence for those things. I'm going to filter everything through this assumption that this person is mean and cruel. If I'm assuming someone's out to harm me or hurt me or doesn't have my best interest at heart, then I'm going to find that evidence because that's what I'm looking for all the time. So the trap of assumptions is that it is a story that we create about another person that we don't actually check, and then we gather all this evidence to feed this assumption. And I'm sure you can relate to this. I'm sure you can sit back and think, wow, what assumptions am I making about other people? And how am I gathering this information? And how is it influencing my filter of this person in this relationship? So the really great way or easy way to step out of this, it doesn't have to be, it's not really complicated, but simple doesn't actually mean easy. Simple sometimes is really hard, is if you've read any of Brene Brown's stuff, this should sound familiar to you. If you have not read Brene Brown, please read some of her books. She has a really great line in her books that says that to approach conversations by sharing this phrase, is the story that I'm telling myself is. It's a really great introduction around sharing your assumptions. So the story that I'm telling myself is that you don't like me. The story that I'm telling myself is that you showed up late on purpose. So what that does is it takes away defensiveness in conversation. Instead of saying, you are doing this, you are doing that, or you make me feel, which is not productive in any kind of way. What it does is when you share the story that you're telling yourself is that you're owning it, owning your assumptions, owning the story that you're creating about another person. And then what that does is it invites somebody into a conversation with you where they can say, that's not my intention at all, or they can actually affirm the story that you're telling yourself. So what this does is creates a conversation that is not really elevated. It is not accusing someone of something. It's not blaming someone for anything. And you're actually owning your own assumptions that you're making about this relationship or what's happening with this person. Now, you'll find if you take this approach that conflict will actually reduce. The intensity of conflict will actually reduce. You won't go to a place of being really elevated, really emotional, or really angry or screaming, or those things just won't happen, because what you're doing is calling out your assumptions and checking in with that person to either confirm or deny it. And that's really empowering for you to say, this is what's happening in my head. This is a story I'm telling myself. And the other person has the ability to have a conversation about it. So what happens in relationship is it creates a closer connection and a little bit more intimacy. Check your assumptions, write them out. Take your journal and write out all the things that you're assuming about a person or a situation, and then take the opportunity to go back to it to say, hey, this is the story that I'm telling myself, and see how that works for you. I can guarantee you it's going to decrease conflict that you have in relationships. So I hope you found this helpful and you can start implementing some of these things. Check your assumptions as much as possible. Trust me, this is going to radically change your life. I hope you have a great day.